Well, we want to turn now to the worsening drought in the Midwest. Water levels along the Mississippi River are now at record lows.
The water is still dropping. Right now, tonight, as you watch this video, one of the most critical pieces of infrastructure in the entire United States is inching toward a threshold that engineers hoped they would never see. A threshold that, once crossed, does not just mean the lights go out for millions of Americans.
The Mississippi River, this is also incredible, has hit historic low levels due to the current drought.
The Mississippi River is at historically low levels, which could impact the food supply and our wallet.
It means the water stops moving. And when the water stops moving, everything downstream, 40 million people, 30 tribal nations, 3 states, 2 countries, faces a crisis that no emergency plan was ever truly designed to handle. 7 states, 2 years of negotiations, 0 agreement, and a river that simply does not care about any of it. This is not a future problem. This is not a worst-case scenario buried in a planning document. This is happening right now, measured in feet and fractions of feet, ticking down like a clock that nobody in power has figured out how to stop. Stay with me, because by the time this video ends, you are going to understand exactly why the situation at Lake Powell is one of the most consequential slow-motion crises in modern American history, and why the people responsible for solving it have so far produced almost nothing. The number that changes everything. Let's start with the number that matters most: 3,490 feet. That is the elevation at which water can no longer reach the 8 turbines inside Glen Canyon Dam at Lake Powell. Below that line, the dam stops generating power. 5 million people across 6 states lose their electricity supply. 28 Colorado utilities scramble for replacement power on the open market. 50 Native American tribes lose the electricity flowing from those turbines. As of this weekend, Lake Powell sits at 3,530 feet above sea level. That is a 40-foot margin, 40 feet standing between functional infrastructure and a power crisis the American Southwest has never experienced before. And the Bureau of Reclamation's own forecast, the federal government's own numbers, projects the reservoir will end this water year at 3,497 feet under the most probable scenario. Under dry conditions, which is what forecasters are currently observing, that projection drops to 3,479 feet. 3,479 feet. That is 11 feet below the threshold, 11 feet below the point of no return. In its 62-year history, Glen Canyon Dam has never fallen below minimum power pool, not once. What is being projected right now is not a dramatic outlier. It is the federal government's own math, applied to the federal government's own data, producing a result that the federal government does not have a plan to prevent. How did we get here? That is the question. And the answer is both simpler and more disturbing than most people realize. The reservoir that has been draining for 25 years, Lake Powell reached full capacity on 3,700 feet on June 22, 1980. It took 17 years to fill after the dam was completed. That was the first and only time in its history the reservoir hit full pool. It has been draining for 25 years. Think about that timeline. A reservoir that took nearly 2 decades to fill has been losing water, net, for a quarter of a century. There have been good years, wet winters that pushed the level back up temporarily, bought a year or 2 of breathing room. But the trend line has pointed in one direction, consistently, relentlessly, for the better part of a generation. By February 2023, Powell hit an all-time record low of 3,521 feet, more than 178 feet below capacity. A wet winter in 2023 pulled it back from the edge. By December 2024, it had climbed to 3,572 feet. 12 months later, it had plunged to 3,536 feet. By January of this year, 3,538 feet. This weekend, 3,530 feet, down 31 feet from just 1 year ago. Here is a detail that should stop you cold. Every single foot the reservoir drops costs 3 megawatts of generating capacity. The dam that once produced 1,320 megawatts of electricity now operates at a fraction of that. And the water is still falling. Now add this. The Colorado River headwater snowpack just recorded its lowest level since measurements began in 1986. Federal forecasters announced that spring runoff to Lake Powell will deliver just 36% of normal, the fifth lowest inflow since the reservoir was created. And the dam is currently releasing 2.5 million more acre-feet of water than the river is putting in. The math is not subtle. The math is brutal. And the math has been running in the wrong direction for decades. The technical catastrophe. Nobody is talking about. Now here is where this story stops being about power bills and starts being about something far more serious. There is a detail buried in a Bureau of Reclamation technical memo that has received almost no mainstream attention, and it should be front-page news in every newspaper in the American West. If Lake Powell drops below 3,490 feet, the dam does not simply stop generating electricity and leave everything else functioning. The water that continues to move through the dam must then be forced through 4 emergency bypass tubes called river outlet works. Infrastructure that was explicitly never designed for extended operation. Read that again. Emergency bypass tubes, never designed for extended operation. The Bureau of Reclamation's own engineers have warned that operating those outlets at low elevations risks structural failure. And if even one of those 4 tubes fails, 1 out of 4, water delivery through the dam becomes limited, or potentially unavailable altogether. Not reduced, not restricted, potentially unavailable. Glen Canyon Dam does not just generate power for 5 million people. It is the valve that controls water flow for 40 million people downstream. Lake Mead, Hoover Dam, Arizona, California, Nevada. Everything downstream depends on water moving through Glen Canyon Dam in a controlled, reliable, continuous flow. If that flow stops, even temporarily, even partially, the consequences cascade downstream in ways that are genuinely difficult to fully model. Agricultural water deliveries interrupted. Municipal water supplies threatened. The river system that a century of infrastructure was built to manage suddenly behaving in ways that infrastructure was never designed to accommodate. Ask yourself this. When was the last time you heard a federal official, a state governor, or a presidential administration address this specific risk directly? The emergency bypass tubes, the structural failure warning, the possibility that the dam could lose the ability to move water at all. The silence on that question is its own kind of answer. The political failure that made it worse. The physical crisis is severe, but the political failure surrounding it may ultimately be the more damaging story. 7 states share the Colorado River. Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, New Mexico in the upper basin, Arizona, California, and Nevada in the lower basin. For more than 2 years, representatives from all 7 have been negotiating replacement rules for how the river is managed, because the 2007 interim guidelines that govern Glen Canyon Dam expired at the end of this year, and the drought response agreement that allowed emergency water releases from upstream reservoirs like Flaming Gorge expired on December 31st. 2 years of negotiation. And on February 14th, those 7 states missed their second federal deadline without agreement. John Ensminger, general manager of the Southern Nevada Water Authority, described the negotiations as having produced almost no headway despite enormous personal effort. The same entrenched positions blocking compromise year after year. Colorado's water commissioner, Becky Mitchell, fired back that her state was being asked to solve a problem it did not create with water. It does not have. Arizona's top water official warned that everyone who benefits from the river must share responsibility for preserving it. 3 states, 3 positions, 0 agreement, and a reservoir dropping by the day. The fundamental question, the one question that 2 years of negotiations have failed to answer, is devastatingly simple. Who cuts their water use first? Nobody wants to be the state that sacrifices. Nobody wants to be the senator who goes home and tells their farmers, their cities, their tribes, their industries, that they have to take less so that everyone downstream can have enough. And so, the negotiations stall, the deadlines pass, and the water keeps falling. Interior Secretary Doug Burgum has now warned that if the states cannot reach consensus, the federal government will impose its own plan by October, a plan that would almost certainly trigger legal challenges heading toward the Supreme Court. And Eric Kuhn, one of the Colorado River Basin's most respected water experts, has warned that nature itself may force the issue before any human negotiation can. That it may not be a political decision, but hydrology that pushes the basin into legal conflict. The river will not wait for the lawyers. The climate reality. Nobody wants to say. Here is the deeper truth that makes all of the political negotiation feel, at times, almost surreal. The Colorado River was divided in 1922, allocated between the upper and lower basins, based on an agreement that assumed 15 million acre-feet of water per year. That assumption was based on the wettest period in the region's recorded history. The negotiators essentially took the best years of available data and wrote them into law as the permanent baseline. The river has not consistently delivered that volume in decades. What is happening now is not a drought in the traditional sense, a temporary dry period that will eventually reverse and restore the system to normal. It is the collision between a century-old accounting error and a climate that no longer produces the water that error assumed. The baseline was wrong from the beginning. The climate has been steadily moving away from even that inflated baseline for a generation. This winter made it undeniable. The basin experienced its warmest winter on record. Storms that should have deposited snow dropped rain instead. Rain hits soil and disappears, absorbed, evaporated, consumed by vegetation before it can flow downstream. The ground is so dry across the basin that it is absorbing runoff like a sponge. Snow that does exist is already melting weeks ahead of schedule, off mountains that release their water before the reservoir is positioned to catch it. In January, a water resources specialist named Michelle Garrison drove from Oregon to Denver and noticed something that stopped her cold. No ice on the roads, no snow in the foothills. She told the Colorado Water Conservation Board that it looked like November everywhere she drove. Her immediate thought was the reservoirs. Denver Water, serving 1.5 million people in the metro area, relies on snowpack for 90% of its supply. In February, the agency reported it was 4 to 5 feet behind its seasonal snowpack goals. Both the Colorado River Basin and the South Platte Basin were at all-time lows in their own records. This is not a bad year. This is a new reality. And the infrastructure, the agreements, and the politics were all built for a reality that no longer exists. The domino effect. Lake Mead is next. If you think Lake Powell going critical is the end of the story, look downstream. Every acre-foot of water withheld from Glen Canyon releases to keep Powell alive is an acre-foot that does not reach Lake Mead. Hoover Dam, Nevada, Arizona, California. The water that saves one reservoir starves the other. Lake Mead is already in a level 1 shortage condition. Under the worst projections, Mead could sink to its own record low by mid-2027, threatening Hoover Dam's turbines next, threatening water deliveries to the most water-dependent agricultural region in the United States, threatening the municipal supplies of Las Vegas, Phoenix, and Los Angeles. The system does not have one failing reservoir. It has 2, and every decision made at Glen Canyon Dam creates consequences at Hoover Dam. There is no solution that saves both at the same time without someone, somewhere, taking significantly less water than they have historically received. Wayne Pullen, the Bureau of Reclamation's Upper Colorado Basin Regional Director, told an advisory panel in late February that all response options are being pursued simultaneously. Emergency water releases from Flaming Gorge Reservoir this spring. Potential cuts to Glen Canyon releases from 7.48 million acre-feet down to as low as 6 million, a reduction that has never before been implemented in the dam's history. Never before implemented. We are in unprecedented territory, and the decisions being made in the next several months will shape water policy in the American West for a generation. The questions that demand answers. So here is where we are tonight. Lake Powell at 3,530 feet. The turbines need 3,490. The most probable federal forecast puts the reservoir at 3,497 by the end of the water year. The dry scenario puts it at 3,479, 11 feet below the power generation threshold. 5 million power customers staring at potential blackouts during the hottest summer months, when demand peaks and every utility in the West is shopping for the same scarce electricity at the same moment. Federal energy watchdogs warning that losing Glen Canyon during peak summer demand could contribute to grid strain and rolling blackouts across western states. 4 emergency bypass tubes that were never designed for extended operation, carrying the water supply for 40 million people, with engineers warning that a single failure could shut down water delivery entirely. 7 states that have spent 2 years producing almost nothing but the same entrenched positions. Agreements expired, deadlines missed, a federal government preparing to impose a solution that will almost certainly end up in the Supreme Court, and a climate that does not negotiate, does not wait, and does not care about anyone's water rights. Here are the questions I want you to think about. If the dam drops below minimum power pool this summer, what exactly replaces that electricity for 5 million people during a heat wave? If the river outlet works activate and one tube fails, who is responsible for the water that does not reach 30 tribal nations in 3 states? And if the federal government imposes a plan and Arizona calls it illegal, who actually controls the river while the lawyers argue? These are not hypothetical questions. These are questions that real families, real farmers, real communities across 7 states need answered right now. And the people in power are not answering them. The water is at 3,530 feet tonight, and it is still dropping. If this story has you concerned, if you think more people need to understand what is actually happening at Lake Powell, share this video. And tell me in the comments, do you think the 7 states will ever reach an agreement, or will it take an actual catastrophe to force action? I want to hear from you. Hit subscribe so you do not miss the next update on this crisis, because the next chapter is coming faster than anyone is ready for.